She's still my wife, but her wedding ring was in the pocket of my own younger brother. I remember that night like it just happened. The house was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. I was standing alone in the laundry room, gathering up clothes to wash for the next morning. When I grabbed Daniel's familiar denim jacket, the brother I once treated like my own blood, I heard a faint clinking sound from the pocket. Curious, I reached in. My fingers touched something ice cold, and when I pulled it out, my heart stopped. It was Emily's wedding ring, the same ring I slid onto her finger 8 years ago on a drizzly afternoon in Boston. The ring she once swore she'd never take off, because it was the symbol of a lifetime promise. I froze, gripping it so tightly my knuckles turned white. Why? Why was her ring in Daniel's jacket? I tried to calm myself down, whispering, "Maybe it's nothing, Brian. Don't jump to conclusions." Dash. But deep down, a cold, sinking feeling started to spread, like an underground current, ready to wash away everything I thought I knew. The next morning, Emily was in the kitchen, her hair falling across her face as she sliced bread. I took a deep breath, forcing my voice to sound steady. "Did you drop your wedding ring?" "I found it in Daniel's jacket." She froze for a split second. The knife in her hand paused mid-slice. Then she smiled, a strained, awkward smile I'd never seen in 8 years of marriage. "Oh, I took it off while doing the dishes and left it on the table. Maybe it fell, and Daniel picked it up and forgot to give it back. Don't worry, okay?" She turned away, going back to scrambling eggs like it was nothing. But I noticed, the whole time, Emily never once looked me in the eye. I wanted to believe her. I had always believed her. But deep inside, something cracked. If only I'd been brave enough that day to press her harder, to dig deeper. Maybe 87 days later, my family wouldn't have been torn apart in the cruelest way imaginable. I'm Brian, 35, a software engineer working for a mid-sized tech company in Chicago. I'm not a perfect husband, but I've always tried my best to give Emily and Sophie a warm, loving home, something my stormy childhood taught me never to take for granted. I met Emily on a late afternoon in the university library. She was a senior in architecture, and I was the awkward coder who practically lived in the lab. She came over to borrow a laptop charger because she'd forgotten hers, and when she smiled, it felt like the whole room lit up. We dated for 2 years before getting married. A small wedding, just close family. I still remember the moment I slid the ring onto her finger. Her hand trembled slightly, and my voice caught in my throat. "I promise. I'll protect you, no matter what." Emily smiled. "As long as you don't forget to do the dishes, I won't leave you." For 8 years, we kept those promises. Then Sophie came into our lives, a little girl with her mother's sparkling brown eyes and my wild, curly hair. I used to worry I wouldn't know how to be a father. But the moment Sophie wrapped her tiny fingers around mine in the hospital, I knew this was my reason to be better every single day. Emily, she's gentle, but never weak. She could stay up all night with a sick child and still greet me with a warm smile and a fresh cup of coffee in the morning. I remember one night I was buried in code when she walked past, placed her hand on my shoulder, and whispered, "Don't work so much that you forget our daughter's birthday. Like you did last year." Her voice was soft, but it cut deep. The guilt stayed with me for days. Daniel, my younger brother, 28, was once the pride of the family. Smart, a stable job in New York. He even had a sweet girlfriend named Lily. But 8 months ago, everything fell apart. He called me on a rainy night, his voice shaking. "Brian, can I stay with you for a while? I've got nowhere else to go." He's my brother. Of course, I said yes without thinking twice. Emily didn't hesitate either. He's family, and we've got a spare room. So Daniel moved in with us. At first, everything was fine. He helped pick up Sophie from school, patched up our leaky roof, even cooked dinner with Emily when I got stuck at work. I remember standing in the doorway one evening, watching them in the kitchen, Emily and Daniel laughing with Sophie as they baked together. And I thought to myself, this is family. This is the life I've always dreamed of. But ever since the night I found Emily's wedding ring in Daniel's jacket pocket, everything has felt different. Emily was still gentle, still kind, but sometimes I'd catch her staring at her phone a little too long, her expression unreadable. Daniel still called me Big Brother, with that familiar warmth in his voice. But every now and then, I noticed the way he looked at Emily, a glance I couldn't quite explain. One morning, as Emily poured Daniel a cup of coffee, she smiled faintly and said, "He's more thoughtful than you give him credit for." I smiled back. But for some reason, her words made my chest tighten. I started noticing the little things, the things I never paid attention to before. Emily began going out more often in the evenings. Sometimes she said she was buying ingredients for baking. Other times she claimed she was meeting friends for work discussions. Normally, I wouldn't have thought much of it. But lately, she's been dressing up more whenever she leaves. Once, I even caught a faint whiff of a new perfume on her collar, a scent Emily had never worn before. Daniel seemed different too. He was always glued to his phone, occasionally smiling at his screen while typing away. I joked one night, "Got yourself a new girlfriend?" Daniel shook his head with a forced smile. "No, bro. I'm not ready for that yet." Then came the night I woke up at 2 a.m. to a noise in the living room. I stepped out and saw the glow of a phone screen lighting up the couch. It was Daniel. He was leaning back against the sofa, eyes locked on his screen, fingers moving fast across the keyboard. I couldn't tell who he was texting, but as I got closer, Daniel flinched, quickly locking his phone and jumping to his feet. You're still awake?" "Yeah, just thirsty." We stood there for a few seconds in silence. I tried to force a smile, but my lips felt dry and stiff. Daniel hurried off to his room. I stayed there, watching him disappear down the hallway, a heavy weight settling in my chest. On another night, I was sitting at my desk, typing lines of code, trying to drown out the growing sense of unease creeping in. When I finally looked up, Emily was standing at the door, holding a mug of warm milk. "Here, drink this. And don't work so hard that you miss your daughter's birthday again. Like last year." She smiled gently, but there was something in her eyes, distant, almost unreachable. I wanted to stand up. I wanted to pull her into an embrace from behind, like I used to. But my feet felt rooted to the floor. I was afraid that if I touched her, she'd flinch and pull away. The next morning, Emily sat feeding Sophie breakfast. Their laughter filled the kitchen, bright and warm. I kept telling myself, "Don't overthink this. This is my family. She's my wife. He's my brother." But even in my own head, the words felt like a weak attempt to comfort myself. One afternoon, as I sat at my desk, Sophie came running in with a messy little drawing in her hands. "Daddy, look, this is Mommy, Uncle Daniel, and me, watching a movie together." I chuckled and patted her head. "Where's Daddy in the picture?" Sophie tilted her head, her voice innocent and sweet. "You're at work at night, Daddy. Uncle Daniel said he'll take care of Mommy and me for you." My chest tightened. I wanted to ask Emily, "Did I do something wrong?" But I kept quiet. I was terrified of hearing an answer I wasn't ready to face. That night, as I was tidying up Sophie's room after she'd fallen asleep, I noticed her favorite doll lying on the floor with a broken leg. I grabbed some glue and carefully pieced it back together. Once the doll stood upright again, I stared at it and let out a bitter laugh. Just like this family. I've been trying to fix something that might have already been broken beyond repair. The night I found that wedding ring, I tried to bury my suspicions deep, so deep they'd never see the light of day. I kept telling myself, maybe I'm just overthinking it. This is Emily, the woman I love and trust more than anyone. This is Daniel, the kid brother who once split a loaf of bread with me when we had nothing but two empty hands. But that feeling, that nagging sense that something was wrong, kept festering like a wound that refused to heal. It seeped into every moment I breathed inside this house. In the weeks that followed, Emily started coming home later and later. One night, I called her around 8 p.m. She didn't pick up. It wasn't until 15 minutes later that she texted back, "I'm at the grocery store." It was too loud to hear the phone. Daniel was often out around the same time. When I asked, he gave me a strained smile. "I'm out looking for work, bro. Can't just sit around all day, can I?" I nodded, forcing a smile of my own, but inside, it felt like someone was squeezing my heart tight. Then one evening, fresh out of the shower, I heard her voice in the living room. Quiet, but loud enough to make me freeze. "Yeah, I'll come by in a bit. Don't worry. He doesn't suspect a thing." "He? Who?" My chest thudded. Each heartbeat pounded like it might rip my ribs apart. When I stepped out, Emily had already ended the call, hurriedly shoving her phone into her bag. She turned to me with a smile. "I'm heading out for a bit. A friend needs help picking wedding decorations." "Which friend?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "Linda. You remember her, don't you? You've met her before." I forced a nod. "Go get some rest, okay? Don't wait up for me." I wanted to believe her. I had always believed her. But in her eyes, a flicker of hesitation, gone in an instant, I found no peace. That night, I sat alone in the living room. The golden light pooled across the cold floor. My shadow stretched long and thin, like that of a stranger in his own home. I thought of Sophie, fast asleep, clutching the doll I had glued back together the night before. And I remembered the vow I made to Emily on our wedding day. "I'll protect this family, no matter what happens." Bah. But how do you protect a family when the family itself might be hiding something from you? The next morning, I finally worked up the courage to ask Emily, "Hey, you've been going out a lot at night lately. Is there something I should know?" Emily flinched slightly. Then she set her coffee mug down and looked me straight in the eyes. "What are you thinking, Brian? Do you honestly believe there's something going on between me and Daniel?" Her question cut through me like a silent blade. I quickly shook my head, swallowing hard. "No, I'm just worried you're working yourself too hard, that's all." She let out a long sigh and placed a hand on my shoulder. "I love you, and only you. Don't let your imagination ruin what we have." But that evening, when Emily said she had an emergency meeting at the office, I made a choice. I followed her. I drove a few hundred meters behind, headlights off, heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst. I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her. But every cell in my body screamed, "Something is happening." And then I saw her turn down a dark street. She stopped in front of an old, run-down house, where Daniel was already standing, waiting. I switched off my headlights and trailed behind Emily, keeping a few hundred meters back. The road was empty, silent. The sound of rain tapping against the windshield felt like someone knocking on the door of my heart, a heart already cracking in places I pretended not to see. When I saw her turn down a narrow, unlit street, my chest tightened so hard it felt like my ribs might splinter. I pulled over across the road, killed the engine, and cracked the window slightly. Cold air crept in, making my hands tremble. And then I saw Daniel. He stood there in his familiar gray hoodie, hands shoved deep into his pockets, eyes locked on Emily. She stopped in front of him. For a few seconds, that felt like a lifetime. The dim yellow streetlight cast shadows across her face. The same face I thought I knew better than anyone else in the world. But in that moment, she looked like a stranger. Daniel said something. Emily nodded softly. Then he pushed the door open and motioned for her to step inside. She hesitated, gripping the strap of her handbag tightly. And then she walked in. The door shut behind her. I sat frozen in my car, hands gripping the steering wheel so hard they went numb. Heavy raindrops thudded against the roof, ticking like a countdown to the moment everything would collapse. "No, no, this can't be happening," I whispered, but my voice sounded so weak it didn't even feel like my own. It took me minutes to finally draw a deep breath and push the door open. My legs felt like jelly, each step unsteady, like I was carrying the weight of the world. I pressed myself against the cold wall. Wind sliced through my jacket, making goosebumps rise on my skin. A faint glow spilled out from the cracks of an old window. Inside, shadows moved across the dim room. I crept closer, heart pounding so loud I feared it would give me away. And then I saw them. Daniel and Emily sat on the sofa, facing each other. Close. Too close. Daniel held her hand, his thumb gently brushing across her knuckles. Emily didn't pull away. My throat tightened. A searing pain spread through my chest, like acid poured straight into my heart. I grabbed the edge of the window to stop myself from collapsing. Have they gone this far already? I asked myself, my eyes burning, ready to spill over. Then I heard Daniel's voice, just loud enough to slip through the cracks. We can't keep hiding this from him. He deserves to know. Emily shook her head, her voice trembling. I know, but I'm scared. If he finds out, this family will fall apart. And Sophie, she'll hate me forever. Daniel gripped her hand tighter. I'll protect you, I promise. I staggered back, each step heavier than the last, as though I was dragging a boulder tied to my chest. Hot tears spilled down my face, mixing with the cold rain that stung my skin. Where did I go wrong? Was I so consumed with work that she felt so alone she sought comfort from my own brother? I climbed back into the car, hands shaking as I turned the key. The engine roared to life, and the rain hammered louder than ever, drowning out the choked sob that clawed its way up my throat. The next morning, I woke to find Emily sitting at the dining table, laughing with Sophie like nothing had ever happened. I stood in the doorway, staring at them. My heart ached, torn between love and rage. But somehow, my lips still curved into a faint, forced smile. I didn't know how to face them, but deep down, I knew. At that moment, I had already lost Emily, even if she was still sitting there, in the kitchen of this very house. Since that night, I became a stranger in my own home. Every morning, I sat at the dining table, forcing a hollow smile as I watched Emily feed Sophie her breakfast. Sophie's laughter, the sound that once made life feel whole, now rang in my ears like an alarm, reminding me I was losing everything, piece by piece. Every night, I lay there in silence beside Emily, staring at the ceiling, asking myself, should I confront her? Should I talk to Daniel? And yet, I was afraid. Afraid that if I opened that door, everything would come crashing down beyond repair. One afternoon, I left work early, hoping to surprise Emily. But as I opened the front door, the house greeted me with a silence so heavy it made my skin crawl. On the kitchen counter, a small note lay alone. I picked up Sophie and went to the store with Daniel. Heat up something from the fridge. I sank into a chair, fingers interlocked, staring at the empty seat across from me, the seat where Emily always sat, sipping her tea in the evenings. I remembered the first day we moved into this house. Emily had wrapped her arms around me, her smile radiant. This will be our little nest, okay? But now, that nest felt like a rotting wooden cabin, waiting for a single spark to burn it all to ashes. When Emily and Daniel returned, I stood motionless in the kitchen, watching them. "You're home early," Emily said, a faint trace of surprise in her voice. "Yeah, I wanted to have dinner with you and Sophie," I replied, struggling to keep my voice even. Daniel lingered behind her, his eyes flickering with something I couldn't quite read, before quickly darting away. That night, over dinner, I tried my best to play the part of a husband and father, but I noticed Sophie's eyes flicking back and forth between me and her uncle, as if even she sensed something off in the air. Later that night, long after Emily had fallen asleep, I lay awake in the dark. Moonlight spilled through the curtains, painting soft shadows across her face. She looked so peaceful, but my heart wasn't. Where did I go wrong? Was I so consumed with work that she felt so lonely she sought comfort from my own brother? The next day, when Daniel stepped out, I crept into his room. I knew I shouldn't be there, but my hands shook as I pulled open one drawer after another. Each drawer opened like a fresh cut across my palms, and I feared that by the time I found the truth, my hands would be bleeding. In the nightstand drawer, I found a small notebook. On the first page, scribbled hastily, "Don't let him find out. He'll hate us both." My chest clenched tight, my heart twisting, as though someone was wringing it dry. I collapsed onto the bed, hands trembling so badly I nearly dropped the notebook. When I stepped out of Daniel's room, my legs felt like jelly. On the table, Emily's phone lay unattended. I picked it up with shaking fingers, my heart pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. The screen lit up with an unread message from Daniel. I talked to Emily. She agreed. Tomorrow night. We'll tell him about the baby. I froze. My grip on the phone tightened until my knuckles turned white. And a single question echoed in my mind, sharp and piercing, like metal scraping against glass. What baby? Those 3 words kept echoing in my head, sharp and relentless, like metal scraping against glass. I stood frozen in the living room, gripping her phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. In the next room, Sophie giggled at her cartoons. That sound used to mean the world to me. But now, it felt like a tiny blade slicing deeper into my chest with every laugh. I forced myself to calm down, put the phone back where it was, and walked to the bedroom like a sleepwalker. That night, Emily slept with her back turned to me. I wanted to reach out, place my hand on her shoulder, pull her into my arms and ask, "Can you just tell me what's going on?" But my hand stayed motionless on the sheets. If she tells me, would I even be strong enough to hear it? The next morning, sunlight slipped through the curtains, wrapping Emily in a soft glow as she prepared breakfast. For a fleeting moment, I almost convinced myself everything was still okay. But then, her eyes met mine, and I caught a flicker of deep sadness she was trying so hard to hide. That afternoon, a text from Daniel came through. Heading out to grab some things. Emily stood up right after. "I'll go with Daniel. Can you stay home with Sophie?" I nodded, swallowing down the question rising in my throat. As they walked out the door, I sat there on the sofa, eyes locked on the doorframe like I could somehow see through it. I can't just sit here. If they plan to tell me tonight, I need to be ready. I opened my laptop and scrolled through old family photos. Emily smiling brightly on our first picnic. Sophie sitting on my shoulders, her tiny arms wrapped tight around my neck. A single tear hit the keyboard. I reached out to the screen with trembling fingers. If I lose them, what will I have left? When the sound of the front door opening echoed through the house, I slammed the laptop shut. Emily stepped inside, a faint whiff of unfamiliar perfume following her into the room. "Not hungry for dinner?" she asked softly. "Not tonight," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. She looked at me for a long moment, then quietly led Sophie upstairs. Around 11 p.m., just after Emily turned off the bedroom light, her phone lit up with a new message. "I'm waiting for you in the car. If you're ready, we'll leave tonight." My heart sank like a stone into a bottomless pit. Leave? Tonight? Are they planning to run away? With the baby? I stepped out onto the balcony, sucking in deep breaths, but the air felt thick, too heavy to breathe. Raindrops tapped against the cold railing, each one echoing like a clock ticking down to the end. I remembered the vow I made at the altar. In sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, I will never leave you. But now, only one question screamed in my mind. And what about you, Emily? The sound of tires crunching on the road outside ripped through the night air. I held my breath and looked down. Daniel's car was parked right outside the house. Emily stood in the doorway, coat on, a suitcase in her hand. She turned back for a moment, her eyes trembling, brimming with tears. And then Daniel stepped out of the car, walked around, and opened the passenger door. He placed a hand on Emily's back, gently guiding her toward the car. I stood there, paralyzed. In that moment, the night sky seemed to cave in around me, and I realized I had already lost Emily, even though she was still standing inside this house. The sound of Daniel's tires screeching against the road cut through the stillness of the night like a blade. I stood on the balcony, my hands gripping the railing so tightly my knuckles turned white. Cold raindrops splattered across my face, but I could no longer tell if it was rain or the tears streaming down my cheeks. Down below, Emily stood at the doorway, wearing her long coat, a suitcase in her hand. Her trembling eyes turned upward, locking onto mine. And in that fleeting moment, I saw the home I had fought so hard to protect, shattering into 1,000 pieces. Daniel stepped out of the car, moving slowly as he circled around. He opened the passenger door and placed a hand gently on Emily's back. A small gesture, yet it crushed my chest like a vice. "Emily, are you really leaving me?" I stormed down the stairs, each step heavier than the last, weighed down by the questions screaming in my head with no answers. The front door swung open so hard it slammed against the wall with a loud thud. Emily flinched, spinning around. Daniel froze too, his eyes widening, a flicker of tension flashing across his face. "You? Why are you awake?" Emily stammered, her voice quieter than the rain pounding outside. "That's my question for the two of you." I stood in the doorway, my voice low and hoarse, rumbling like the weak growl of an animal cornered with nowhere left to run. "Emily, what are you doing? Daniel, why are you here?" Neither of them answered. Only the sound of heavy rain filled the silence, and the pounding of my own heart in my chest. Emily kept her gaze down. Daniel took a small step forward, positioning himself between us. "Brian, please, let me explain," Daniel said, his voice trembling. My fists clenched so tight my nails dug into my palms. A part of me wanted to lunge forward, grab Daniel by the collar and scream, "What have you done to my wife?" But my feet felt nailed to the floor. "I don't need to hear anything else." My voice cracked, breaking under the weight in my chest. "I've already understood everything." "No, you don't understand at all," Emily suddenly shouted, her voice breaking, her eyes welling with tears. I stood frozen, rain dripping from my hair, trailing salty streaks across my lips. Emily's hands trembled as she let go of her suitcase. It hit the floor with a harsh thud, the sound of the zipper rattling on the tiles like the snapping of a fragile heartbeat. "You think Daniel and I are betraying you?" Her voice quivered, her lips trembling. "You really think I could do that to you, Brian?" I said nothing. In my mind, images flashed in a storm. Their stolen glances, Daniel's hand gripping hers, the message about the baby. "I can't think otherwise, Emily," I whispered, my eyes burning from holding it all in. Emily's tear-streaked face turned to me. She inhaled sharply, her voice breaking as she spoke. "Brian, I'm not betraying you. That baby, it's Daniel and Anna's child. And there's something else. Something I couldn't bring myself to tell you. Because I was afraid." Emily's voice cracked, her tears mixing with the rain pouring down her face. "That baby, it's Daniel and Anna's child. But there's something else. Something I couldn't bring myself to tell you. Because I was afraid." I stood there frozen, my heart pounding out of control. "Anna," I whispered. "You mean Daniel's late wife?" Emily nodded, her trembling hands clutching the hem of her coat. "The day Anna passed, Daniel nearly fell apart completely. He took sleeping pills once. And if I hadn't arrived in time, you would have lost your brother." She drew a shaky breath as tears spilled from her eyes. "Before she died, Anna left behind a will. She wanted her child to be born through medical procedures. But Daniel wasn't strong enough to face fatherhood on his own. I stayed by his side during that time, trying to pull him back from the edge." I stood rooted to the ground. Images flashed through my mind, the glances between Emily and Daniel, his hand gripping hers, the times they disappeared together. Was it all just in my head? Emily's voice broke, every word shattering like glass. "I was scared to tell you, scared you'd misunderstand, scared this family would fall apart. But the more I kept it from you, the deeper I pushed you into doubt, and turned myself into the villain." Daniel lowered his head, his voice hoarse. "Brian, I'm sorry. I hid it from you because I wanted you to have peace with your family. But my weakness only caused you more pain. I deserve your hatred." I looked at Daniel, the brother who held my hand through the hardest years of our childhood. And I looked at Emily, the woman who once vowed to stay with me in sickness and in health. At that moment, a crack of thunder split the night sky, as if tearing apart the heavy shroud of suspicion I had been trapped in all this time. What kind of man have I become? A man who built a wall of doubt and locked himself inside. My knees buckled as I collapsed, my hands covering my face. A strangled sob escaped my throat, the kind of sound I swore Sophie would never have to hear from me. Emily dropped to her knees beside me, her trembling hands resting on my shoulders. "I'm sorry, Brian. I was wrong to keep this from you. But I have never stopped loving you." I lifted my head, my eyes red and raw from holding it all in for too long. My voice came out broken, raspy. "I don't hate you. I don't hate you, Daniel. I only hate myself for letting my imagination destroy my trust." Daniel broke down in tears, his shoulders shaking violently. The three of us stayed there under the pouring rain, letting it wash away the pain and bitterness we had all carried for so long. I pulled Emily into my arms, holding her tightly. And in that moment, I realized, if you don't have the courage to face the truth, you'll end up destroying your own happiness. This home, though cracked and fragile, hadn't fallen apart. Not tonight. The rain from that night lingered well into the morning. I sat silently by the window, watching streaks of water slide down the glass. Outside, the sky hung gray and heavy, its chill seeping in deep enough to make me shiver. Emily was still asleep in the bedroom. Daniel had returned after promising to care for the baby and handle what remained with his family. But this house felt like a stranger now. I let my eyes wander across the living room. Family photos hung on the walls, smiles we once shared, moments that now felt like jagged memories cutting into my chest. This house still stands, but the cracks in its walls mirror the fractures in our hearts. Emily stepped out of the bedroom, her frame delicate in an old sweater. She paused, her eyes meeting mine with a flicker of hesitation. "You're not going to work today?" she asked softly, as if afraid to wake something fragile that lingered in the room. "I took the day off," I replied, my gaze still fixed on the rain outside. Emily sat across from me, her hands clasped tightly together, trembling. The room fell silent. Only the steady tick of the wall clock filled the space, counting down to the moment we'd finally have to say what needed to be said. "Emily," my voice cracked, each word dragging its way out of my chest. "I'm sorry." Her head lifted, her tear-filled eyes locking onto mine. "I'm sorry I let my imagination destroy the trust between us. I'm sorry I made you carry all of this." In silence, Emily broke down, her face falling into her hands as sobs escaped her lips. I watched her. The distance between us was only a few steps, yet it felt like 1,000 miles. If I moved too fast, the fragile thread still tying us together might snap completely. "I'm sorry too, Brian," she whispered through tears. "I should have trusted you. I should have told you sooner. But I was scared. Scared you'd never look at Daniel the same way again. Scared you'd hate me." I closed my eyes. And in that darkness, I saw myself on those nights, silently following Emily, piecing together glances and gestures, twisting them into something poisoned by blind jealousy. And I saw myself for what I was, a weak man who let fear rip apart everything he loved. When I opened my eyes again, my voice trembled. "Emily, I want to believe there's still a chance for us, but I know this has left a deep crack in both of us." Emily said nothing. A single tear slipped down her hand, quiet as a confession. "I need time. Time to learn how to trust you again. And if one day I don't have the strength to hold on anymore, would you be willing to take that step toward me, to pull me back?" Emily looked up, her eyes red and glassy, as if holding back 1,000 unspoken words. "You asked, if you no longer had the strength to wait, would I pull you back?" She drew in a trembling breath, her lips pressed tight to hold back a sob. "Yes, I'd do anything to bring you back, because you are my home, Brian. If I lose you, I wouldn't know where to go." I stared deep into Emily's eyes. There was fear in them, and regret, but also, faintly flickering, the same spark of love I once saw when we first met. And yet, for a fleeting moment, I caught her glance drifting away, as if there was still something she couldn't bring herself to say. We sat in silence for what felt like forever. The room was small, yet the distance between our hearts felt like miles. "I still love you, Emily," I said, my voice low and hoarse. "But I need time. Time to learn how to trust you again. And I know you'll need time to forgive me too." Emily nodded, her hands clutched tightly in her lap. "Then let's start over. Slowly. Can we do that?" I didn't answer right away. I thought of Sophie, still asleep in her room, unaware that her parents had been standing on the edge of breaking apart. I thought of Daniel, my younger brother, quietly carrying his own grief, now staring down a future as a single father. And I thought of myself, a man who let fear and old wounds tear apart his happiness, nearly beyond repair. "All right," I murmured, "slowly, but don't let it be too late." Emily gave a faint smile. For the first time in days, her eyes no longer looked completely consumed by despair. That evening, we cooked dinner together for Sophie. Emily chopped vegetables. I washed the dishes. Every so often, our eyes met, then quickly looked away. Something in the air had shifted. The suffocating weight of doubt was gone, replaced by the fragile tension of a thread newly tied back together, a thread that could snap again if not handled with care. Later, as Sophie wrapped her arms around my neck and whispered, "Daddy, don't be sad anymore, okay? Mommy says our family will be all right." I held her tight, my throat tightening. "I promise. Our family will be all right." But as the words left my lips, a sharp ache pulsed through my chest, as if even I couldn't fully believe the promise I'd just made. When I glanced at Emily, it hit me. For that promise to hold, we would have to face more pain together. And one question lingered in my mind all through the night. Can these cracks ever truly heal? Or will they one day give way, with nothing more than a passing breeze? 3 months have passed since that rainy night. Our house looks the same. The family photos still hang on the walls. Sophie's tiny shoes still lie scattered by the door. But one thing has changed forever. Emily and me. Every morning, we still sit by the window with our coffee, watching little Sophie run across the yard, her laughter ringing through the air. But between the sips of coffee, there are long pauses. Pauses that no longer feel as heavy as before, but still aren't quite peaceful. I remember Emily saying once, "Do you know what scares me the most, Brian? I'm afraid I'll give everything I have to mend us. And one day, when you look at me, all you'll see is a crack that never healed." I didn't answer right away. I just held her hand tighter, because I understood. Trust, once broken, can't be fixed with promises. It can only heal with time, or never heal at all. Some nights, when Emily is asleep, I slip out onto the balcony. The night air is cold, the wind cutting through my thin shirt, as I sit there for hours, wondering, if one day she walks away again, will I have the courage to hold on this time? I used to think love was like fire, burning bright or fading out completely when there's nothing left to feed it. But now, I see it differently. Love is more like a tree. It needs watering every day. It needs sunlight. It needs shadows too. And if you leave it unattended long enough, its roots will rot, leaving nothing but a hollow trunk standing against the wind. Daniel called me last week. His voice was still hoarse, like it had always been, but steadier somehow. "I'm scared, big brother. But when I look at the baby, I know I have to be strong. For her. And for Anna, too." I stayed quiet for a moment before replying softly, "I've been scared too, Daniel. And even now, some days, I still am." That evening, as Emily and I cleared the dinner table, Sophie came running up and hugged my leg, giggling. She looked up at me with those big brown eyes, so much like her mother's, and asked innocently, "Do you and Mommy love each other?" The question made my chest tighten. Emily froze, the plate in her hands trembling slightly. I bent down, picked Sophie up, and held her close. "Yes, sweetheart, Mommy and Daddy love each other. Very much." Emily looked at me, her eyes glistening. I met her gaze with a smile. Not perfect, not whole, but more honest than ever. That night, as Emily fell asleep on my shoulder, I stayed awake. I watched her, gently brushing a strand of messy hair from her face, and thought, maybe we're no longer the flawless people we once were. But love doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs enough courage to stay, even when everything feels broken. Can these cracks ever truly heal? Or will they one day collapse completely, with nothing more than a passing breeze? And you, if there was a place to come back to, would you have the courage to knock on that door again?